Very early the next morning, Captain Beaky and his band marched down to the river where their boat, the HMS Most Leaky, was moored. With them they had, in addition to the rubbish bag, a pocketful of candles, a compass, a basket of provisions, matches and a telescope, and a lot of string. "The idea," said Owl, "is that we tie the bottom of the bag to the sides of the boat, light the candles, and the hot air will fill the bag. We all climb in, and off we go." "We won't go too high, will we?" said Toad.
"Not if we get off the ground at all, if you ask me," said Rat.
Down by the river they busied themselves tying the rubbish bag to the biscuit tin, unaware that a pair of beady eyes were watching them.
"So that's where my sleeping bag has got to,"
hissed Sid.
"I might have guessed."
And slithering nearer, he strained his ears to hear what they were saying.
"It's all tied on," said Rat. "I hope this works."
"So do I," said Bat. "I'm freezing." "I think we should go home," said timid Toad. It's getting rather foggy." "Oh, stop moaning," said Captain Beaky. "Now, Rat, you pull the bottom of the bag up above the boat. I'll light the candles." And taking a box of matches out of his pocket, he struck light to a cluster of small coloured candles that stood in the centre of the boat. "I hope this works," said Toad. "I was saving those for my birthday cake." Sid raised his head and stared with amazement as the rubbish bag got bigger and bigger and bigger. "It's working," squeaked Bat. "We're going to find the summer." "I was never in any doubt," said Owl. "Quick, climb aboard," said Captain Beaky. "It's starting to move." They all climbed aboard except Toad, when the biscuit tin suddenly left the ground.
"Quick, grab that string,"
said Rat. With a desperate hop, timid Toad caught hold of the string that Rat had thrown to him, and he held on, shutting his eyes tightly. And when he opened them, the river looked like a piece of silver ribbon below. "Help!" said Toad. "Hang on," said Captain Beaky. "We're pulling you up." And after a lot of heaving and cries of, "Don't look down, Toad," he was pulled aboard. Down below, hissing Sid gazed up at the sky till they were out of sight. It was only then that he realised he had his mouth wide open with surprise, and there was a lot of cold air going in. So he shut it. "Well, if Beaky and his band were going away," thought Sid, "I know a nice warm place to spend the winter." And slithering off, he headed for Owl's house. "Fog's coming down again," said Captain Beaky. "I can't see a thing." He peered anxiously through his telescope.
"Well," said Rat, "by my watch we've been up here for nearly an hour."
"And we're running out of candles," said Bat.
"It was a big mistake," said Rat, "not using Owl's birthday candles. He's so old we could have stayed up here for days."
"How much further do you think the summer is?" said Captain Beaky. "Well, it all depends on which way we're going, and without the sun I can't read the compass," said Owl.
"Well, put your glasses on," said Rat.
"I mean," said Owl, "I need the sun to work out our position. We're probably thousands of feet up in the sky and travelling very quickly indeed southwards. Or northwards, depending on the wind."
"If we're thousands of feet up in the sky," said Rat, "why's that squirrel waving to us from the top of that tree?"
"Hold on," said Captain Beaky. I think we're coming down. We're just skimming along the tops of the trees. I say, look out, we're going to crash if we're not careful." Owl glanced over the side anxiously. "They look like foreign trees to me," said Owl hopefully. "There's one or two I don't recognise."
"If we don't throw something out quick," said Rat, "we're going to crash."
And picking up a basket of provisions, he held them over the side. But before he could drop them, they crashed into the top of a large tree and remained there, stuck fast. "Good heavens," said Captain Beaky, "where are we?" "Oh, probably France or Spain or somewhere well on the way, I'm sure," said Owl. "Get the rope ladder and we'll climb down." One by one they climbed down the rope ladder that was always kept in the bottom of the boat. Timid Toad jumped from the end to the ground. "This tree's got a door in it," said Timid Toad. "I think somebody lives here."
"They do indeed," said Rat, as he jumped to the ground. "An old idiot lives here."
Owl, who was puffing and panting as he climbed down, paused. "How do you know that?" he said.
"Because his name's above the door," said Rat. "Look."
Owl put on his spectacles and peered. The sign above the door read, "Owl's house." A short while later, the frying-pan fire burned brightly as they all sat round warming themselves. "Well, it was a good idea," said Captain Beaky, "but I think I'd rather spend the winter here." Owl gave an embarrassed cough. "Yes, well, I'm sorry about that, but one learns by one's mistakes. I mean, nothing's been lost."
"Except our boat," said Rat, "which is now on the roof."
"Ah, I've got a good idea how to get that down," said Owl. But only the sound of snoring greeted his remark. "Which I shall tell you in the summer," he added, and lying back in his chair, he closed his eyes, and his snores soon joined the others. From the end of one of the hollow branches leading off the chimney there came an even louder snore. Hissing Sid had found a very comfortable place to sleep, and as long as Captain Beaky and his band kept that fire burning, he was going to spend the winter in the warmest place in the wood. This story is called Captain Beaky and the Haunted Wood. Captain Beaky and his trusted band of followers were all working very hard painting the HMS Most Leaky, their biscuit tin boat. They had decided to paint it blue. Now this really wasn't a very difficult decision to make, because they only had 2 tins of paint, one blue and one green, and the lid of the green paint was stuck on so firmly that no one could get it off. There was already quite a lot of blue paint on the boat and on Reckless Rat's hat. There was also quite a bit on Captain Beaky's nose, Al's feet, and Batty Bat's wings, and Timid Toad was blue from head to foot. He'd been standing on the edge of the paint pot to paint the mast, and on stepping back to admire his handiwork, he had disappeared with a plop, and had to be pulled out gasping and spluttering and blowing blue bubbles. To make matters worse, he tried to clean himself up with the handkerchief sail and made himself very unpopular, as now that was blue as well. And so they were all very relieved when an aged mole staggered out of the wood shouting, "Stop work! I need your help!" "Trouble, men," said Captain Beaky. "We'll have to stop work." So putting their brushes into a small jam jar full of turpentine, they sat down and listened to the aged mole's story. "Last night," said Aged Mole, "I was patrolling the wood when I spotted Hissing Sid." Then lowering his voice he continued, "He had such an evil look on his face that I decided to follow him." Could you speak up?" said Toad. "I'm afraid I've got some blue paint in my ear." "I don't see why you had to mention blue paint," said Owl. "You'd be just as deaf if it was green." "What was that?" said Toad. "Never mind," said Captain Beaky in a loud voice. "Let's hear Mole's story. Speak up, Mole."
Where was I?
said Aged Mole.
Following Sid, said Reckless Rat. Now get on with the story. What happened?
It was a very dark part of the wood, said Mole.
Sid came face to face with Mandy the Mouse.
Well, what happened? Said Captain Beaky impatiently.
Well, said the Aged Mole, she had a big box of candy with her, and before she could run, Sid had tied her to a tree with her tail and taken the candy.
Well, we shall need her as a witness when we catch him, said Owl.
Ah, said Aged Mole, wagging his finger knowingly, that's the problem. She won't remember anything.
Why not? Said Batty Bat. I bet I'd remember being tied to a tree. Let's get on with the story, said Captain Beaky. What happened then?
Ah, yes, said the Mole. It's coming back to me now. He hypnotised her. Snakes can do that, you know.
Oh, can they? Said Toad. How?
He swayed about like this, said the Aged Mole, and hummed a little tune, and told her she'd remember nothing.
And to demonstrate how Hissing Sid had hypnotised Mandy the Mouse, the Aged Mole stood up and swayed from side to side, humming a little tune. That sort of thing only affects people with weak minds, said Owl. Wouldn't you agree, Captain Beaky? Captain Beaky? Owl turned to where Captain Beaky had been sitting. Captain Beaky was lying flat on his back, staring at the sky.
Ah, that's what happened to me, said the Aged Mole, and I've only just woken up.
Artful Owl took a paintbrush out of the turpentine jar and waved it under Captain Beaky's nose. Oh, wake up, he said. Captain Beaky gave a sneeze and sat up. What happened? What were you saying, he said. I was saying, said Owl, that only people with weak minds could be hypnotised. Oh, yes, said Captain Beaky. Now, what happened to Mandy the Mouse?
When Sid had gone, said the Aged Mole, I untied her and I took her home.
Well, what about the box of candy, said Tippy Toad. I mean, what happened to that?
Oh, he took it with him, said the Aged Mole.
Come on, men, said Captain Beaky. Let's go to where the Aged Mole saw this happen and see if we can find a trail.
Oh, follow me then, said the Aged Mole, and pulling down his moleskin hat, he headed for the woods, followed by Captain Beaky and his band. That is, all except for Timid Toad. Oh, come on, Toad, called Owl. I can't, said Timid Toad. The paint's dried, and I'm stuck to the ground. After a lot of pulling and heaving and, Ow, you're pulling my arm off, from Toad, they managed to unstick him, and led by the Aged Mole, they went into the wood. Ah, said Reckless Rat, I've found a clue.
And bending down, he picked up a small piece of coloured wrapping paper. It's quite clear, said Owl, that Hissing Sid was unable to wait until he got home and started to eat the candy. Here's another, and another. Oh, look, he's left a trail, said Bat. All we have to do, said Owl, is to follow this trail, and we'll catch him. Well, what are we waiting for, said Captain Beaky. Come on, men. So, led by their gallant captain, Owl, Toad, Rat, Bat, and the aged Mole all walked through the wood, picking up bits of coloured candy wrappers. "I don't like this part of the wood," said Timid Toad with a shudder. "The trees grow so close together that it's all dark and damp. Not only that, the trees seem to be staring at us."
"They do say," said the aged Mole, "that this part of the wood be haunted." "Well, I'm not scared of ghosts," said Reckless Rat.
Timid Toad's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Did you say ghosts?" he stammered. "I mean real ghosts." "How could they be real ghosts?" said Artful Owl, "when ghosts aren't real?" And bending, he picked up another coloured candy wrapper. "How do you know they're not real?" said Timid Toad. "Because you could see straight through them," said Artful Owl. "I must say," said Captain Beaky, glancing round nervously, "that it is very cold and damp round here, and I can't see any more candy wrappers, so perhaps we'd better call the search off and go back to painting the boat." Owl raised his eyebrows. "You're not scared, are you?" Captain Beaky gave a nervous laugh. "What? Me scared? Me, the leader of the bravest animals in the land? Scared? Good heavens, no! The Beakys have a family motto, you know." "Oh, really?" said Toad. "What's that?" "Brave men run in our family." "Well, they run in mine too," said Timid Toad, "and jolly quickly." Bat, who'd been looking anxiously over his shoulder, spoke in his high, squeaky voice. "Shall I fly up in the sky and see if I can spot Hissing Sid? I probably stand a very good chance of seeing him from up there." "You wouldn't want to just fly straight home, would you?" said Owl. Bat crossed his fingers behind his back. No, he said. "Oh, no." "Oh, very well," said Captain Beaky, "but do keep in touch." "Right," said Batty Bat. "Here I go." And flapping his wings, he hopped up and down, and then he started hopping round in circles.
"What's the matter?" said Rat. "Isn't the runway long enough?"
"It's the paint on my wings," said Bat. "I can't get off the ground. Oh, dear." After a few more despairing flaps, he gave up. The aged Mole cupped his hand to his ear.
"Oh, listen," he said. "Can you hear that? Sounds like a very strange noise to me. Listen."
"That was a long, low moan," said Captain Beaky. "Thank heavens I've still got paint in my ears," said Toad. "I'm sure I'd be very frightened if I heard it." "Oh, come here, Toad," said Owl crossly, and pulling a feather from his tail and using it like a pipe cleaner, he cleaned the paint out of both of Toad's ears.
"Oh, there it is again," said the aged Mole.
Toad's eyes bulged, and he put his fingers in his ears so that he couldn't hear it.
"What is it?"
said Rat in a whisper, and even Rat looked a bit pale, and his long nose twitched anxiously. This time the noise was louder, and they all heard it, even Toad.
"Oh, I'm getting out of here," cried the aged Mole,
and he ran off as fast as his aged legs would carry him. "So am I," said Bat, and running round in circles, he flapped twice as hard as he'd ever flapped before, but he still couldn't get off the ground. A loud moan followed by a very loud groan came from very, very near. This was too much for Captain Beaky, and grasping his hat firmly with both hands, he pulled it down over his eyes. Whatever it was that was haunting the wood, he certainly didn't want to see it.
"Whatever it is," said Rat, his keen ears twitching, "it's behind that big old oak tree, just over there, in that very dark shadow."
"We'll all get very close behind Captain Beaky," said Owl, "and we'll go and look behind that tree in that very dark shadow, and we'll see what it is." "I'm going to keep my hat down over my eyes," said Captain Beaky, "just in case the sight of whatever it is behind that dark tree, in that very dark shadow, makes me go so weak at the knees that I wouldn't be able to run away with the rest of you." So with Owl pushing him from behind, and with Reckless Rat and Toad following very closely, they tiptoed towards the big oak tree. But all was quiet, and all they could hear was the wind sighing through the leaves and the creaking of the gnarled old branches above their heads. Another blood-curdling groan came from behind the tree. Captain Beaky stopped and pulled his hat up to reveal eyes that were twice their normal size. "It's no good," he said. "I can't stand the suspense."
"Go on," hissed Owl. "We're nearly there. You don't want the others to think you're not brave, do you?"
"Would you like to go first?" whispered Captain Beaky.
"No," said Owl,
And gave Captain Beaky a forceful push in the back. Caught by surprise, Captain Beaky tripped over his feet, ran forward and disappeared into the shadows behind the tree. There was another dreadful groan, much louder than before, and then the sound of laughter. Holding his sides and laughing so much he could hardly walk, Captain Beaky appeared in view and beckoned the others to join him. He pointed at something behind the tree. The sight that met their eyes made them all roar with laughter, for lying there on the ground, surrounded by dozens and dozens of empty candy wrappers, was a very sick Hissing Sid, and next to him was an empty box of candy. "He's got indigestion," said Owl. "That's the price you pay for being so greedy," said Toad. and walking over, he kicked Hissing Sid in the tail. Sid opened one eye. "Oh dear," he hissed, "I must be very ill. I've just seen a blue toad." And closing his eye, he gave another long, low groan. The last story I'm going to tell you is called Hissing Sid and the Swimming Lesson. It was a lovely hot spring day in the woods. Grasshoppers were rubbing their legs together to let other grasshoppers know where they were. Bumblebees buzzed sleepily round the wild flowers and herbs, and down by the river a family of ducklings followed their mother to the water for their first swimming lesson. One by one they jumped in, calling out to the less brave ones, "Hey, come in! It's lovely and wet, and oh, look at me! I can't sink even if I turn head over paddlers." Nearby, from a dark hole at the bottom of an old twisted oak tree, a pair of beady eyes watched these proceedings without blinking. The eyes belonged to none other than the most feared creature in the wood, Hissing Sid the snake. On this particular day, Sid was keeping cool in one of his hiding holes, feeling rather depressed, when this family of new ducks marched past for their first swim. As they shouted and splashed, Sid sighed a sad sigh, and wished he had a family to play with. But whenever he tried to join in any sort of woodland game with other animals, just the sight of him, particularly when he smiled, made them hop, jump, or fly off as fast as they could. Once he had made friends with a worm, and had spent hours trying to teach it tricks. But after 2 weeks, he discovered, to his annoyance, that he'd been talking to the wrong end of the worm, and he'd got very cross and eaten it. Wriggling out of his hole and keeping in the shade, he slithered along the river bank. He'd only gone a few yards when he saw the duck's big nest, made of reeds and rushes and glued together with lots of mud. Sid couldn't resist a quick peep over the top. Good heavens! He could hardly believe his beady eyes, for right under his nose was a big fluffy ball of feathers, scrabbling up the side and falling back into the bottom with squeaks of annoyance. Anybody looking? No. Good. Opening his mouth and reaching down into the nest, Sid picked up the fluffy ball, which gave a gasp of surprise. It was at that very moment, on that same hot spring day, that a battered biscuit tin, with the words HMS Most Leaky painted on its side, drifted into view. A limp handkerchief sail hanging from its mast, Captain Beaky sat in the stern with his hat pulled well down over his eyes, one leg over the side, trailing his toe in the warm river water. Batty Bat hung upside down from the mast, fast asleep. An artful owl was out of sight, but his loud snores indicated that he was having 40 winks. Of Reckless Rat and Timid Toad there was no sign. Sid froze with fear. Thank heavens all the members of Captain Beaky's band were fast asleep. But all the members of the band were not asleep, for at that moment Timid Toad, who had been told to keep the HMS Most Leaky dry, suddenly popped up into view with a tin cup full of water. He was so surprised to see Sid that instead of pouring the water into the river, he poured it back into the boat. "Wake up, everybody!" shouted Toad. "It's Hissing Sid. He's stealing a bird from a nest." Captain Beaky leapt up so quickly that he nearly fell overboard. "Where?" he shouted. "Where?" And looking round, he peered in every direction, but as he'd forgotten to pull his hat up from over his eyes, he couldn't see anything, except his feet. Artful Owl, who was one of those clever people who can wake up in a second, already had a hand over his eyes, shading them from the sun. "Oh, look over there on the bank," he cried, pointing. "Stop, thief!" shouted Timid Toad, safe in the knowledge that he was with brave friends. And then, just to show how brave he felt, he shouted, "Wait until I get my hands on you, you slimy snake!" Sid felt his heart pounding so loudly that he was sure the whole woodland could hear it. Suddenly, with great speed, he slithered off, heading for his most secret hiding place, with the small bundle of squeaking fluff in his mouth, thinking to himself, "Thank goodness there's no wind and Beaky's boat is drifting downstream, and even more, thank goodness, my most secret hiding place is upstream." After a brief struggle with his hat, Captain Beaky managed to pull it up, and blinking in the sunlight, he took charge of the situation. Full speed ahead," he shouted, and "hard to starboard! All hands on deck!" And then, cupping his hands, he shouted, "Wake up, Bat!" Bat was so startled that he let go of the mast and fell onto his head at the bottom of the boat. "Ow!" said Bat. "That hurt." "After him!" shouted Captain Beaky. "Quick, he's getting away!" "Who?" said Bat. "Hissing Sid," said Toad. "And there's no wind, so we can't chase him." "There may not be wind down here on the river," said our Owl, "but high up in the sky there's always wind. Pass me that ball of string at the bottom of the boat." Reckless Rat, who'd been fast asleep with his head on the ball of string, woke up with a grunt and said, "Here, what's going on? I was having a nice kip down there." "We're chasing Hissing Sid," said Timid Toad, passing the string, "but there's no wind, so we can't." "Then why did you bother to wake me up?" said Bat, rubbing his eyes. "I didn't," said Owl. "But now you are awake, tie the string round your ankle and fly as high as you can." "That sounds like a bad idea," said Bat. "I like it." "I can't see the point of it," said Rat. "I should have thought it was obvious," said Owl, "even to the meanest intelligence, that if there is no wind on the river, we shall have to find some higher up." "Of course," said Captain Beaky. "What a good idea! A bat kite to pull the boat. We'll soon catch Hissing Sid." "Oh dear," said Toad, very quietly so nobody could hear him, and then very loudly so they could all hear, "Oh, good!" The bat flapped up towards the clouds, then stopped. "Dash!" he squeaked. "Dash, dash, dot, dot, dash!" "What's he say?" said Rat. "There's a stupid rat standing on the string," said Owl. "Now get off it." By now Sid had slithered round a bend in the river, and he stopped with a sigh of relief. "No chance of Captain Beaky and his band catching me now," he thought. He wiped his brow with his tail and put the fluffy bundle down on the grass. Two very cross little eyes stared out of it. "Who are you?" it squeaked. "I'm Hissing Sid," hissed Sid, "and I'm taking you to my most secret hiding place." "What for?" inquired his captive nervously. "I'll ask the questions," hissed Sid. "And how is it that you can talk so well when you've only just been born?" The bundle of fluffy feathers puffed itself up proudly. "I was born yesterday," it said, "but I've been in my egg listening to my brothers and sisters for 3 days. So of course I can talk. My egg had an extra thick shell and was very hard to get out of. Now, why are you taking me to your most secret hiding place?" "Well," hissed Sid, wriggling about uncomfortably, "you see, I don't have anyone to play with, and I was lonely. All I wanted was a friend who'd like me." Sid smiled his best smile and crossed his eyes to look funny, and then, tying his tail in a knot, he hit himself over the head with it and pretended to be hurt. "Oh, do that again," said his newfound admirer. "I did enjoy that." Later," hissed Sid, rubbing his head with his tail. How would you like a swimming lesson?" "Oh, what fun," said the bundle of fluff. "By the way, what am I? I mean, no one's told me yet." "Well, you're a duck," hissed Sid, and gently picking up his new companion by the leg, he slithered to the edge of the bank, leaned over and opened his mouth. There was a tiny splash, and the fluffy bundle disappeared. Sid's mouth fell open with surprise. It didn't float. What on earth was the matter? A very wet and cross-looking, bedraggled bundle of waterlogged fluff popped up to the surface. "Glug! Glug, glug! Help!" it shouted. "Glug!" and vanished again. Sid dived into the water, and rescuing his non-swimming pupil, he threw himself onto the bank. The pupil lay on its back. "Cuckoo!" it coughed. "Cuckoo! Cuckoo, cuckoo!" "Oh," said Sid. "Oh, what a fool I am. I've been trying to teach a cuckoo to swim." And then, taking a deep breath and puffing out his cheeks, he blew on the soggy fluff to try and dry it out. He was still blowing hard when the biscuit tin sailed into view. "There he is!" shouted Captain Beaky. "Quick, men! After him!" Hissing Sid had just time to unknot his tail and slither off at full speed when Captain Beaky and his band rushed up the river bank.
"It's too late," said Owl. "He's gone."
Are you sure?" whispered Toad, peering over the side of the boat. "Better get this baby back to its mother," said Beaky, "before it catches cold."
"Good gracious, it's a cuckoo," said Owl. "Their mothers are so lazy, they're always laying eggs in other birds' nests. But in a duck's nest? That's really unusual. We'll have to find another family for it."
"We'll look after it,"
said Rat, putting his coat round the cuckoo to keep it warm.
"No," said Captain Beaky, "we're too busy doing good."
"Oh," said Rat. "What a pity."
As they sailed off, two beady eyes watched them disappear, and Hissing Sid gave a sad sigh. Just then a worm wriggled past his nose.
"Here, you," hissed Sid. "I'd like to teach you a trick or two. I know some very good ones."
But the worm just disappeared down a hole without taking any notice at all. It just wasn't Sid's day.